Hello, everybody. I'm Randy Horton. Thanks for coming out. I'm the VP of Solutions and Partnerships at Orthogonal. Very briefly, for those of you who don't know us, Orthogonal's mission is to help accelerate patient outcomes faster. And the way we do it is by bringing modern engineering methods and product development methods to the development of software as a medical device, digital therapeutics, and connected medical device systems. I want to thank you all for turning out today. It's a really good attendance, and the numbers actually keep ticking up as I look at it. We have a short webinar. We've promised you all 40 minutes, and we will do that. We will deliver our core conversation and hopefully answer a couple questions in 40 minutes because we wanted this to be a lunchtime in and out thing, at least for those of you on the East Coast. It could be breakfast in and out, I suppose, for some of you on the West Coast. But the panelists are available to stay longer. So if there's more questions you want to discuss, there's no rush to get off afterwards. So in brief, it's basically been 10 years. It's 2022, and in 2012, AAMI published TIR 45, Guidance on the Use of Agile Practices in the Development of Medical Device Software. And it's really been quite a decade since then, certainly in the larger software world where adoption of Agile has just become the default, I would almost describe it as, and really taken things by storm, especially in the last 10 years. But it's really been a tremendous 10 years in medical device and regulated medical device software as we've been applying Agile practices and learning how they do and don't work, or how we adapt them to our space to do what in the name of the series, move faster and break nothing. You know, we like to say, if you move faster and break things with a medical device, you're breaking a human body. And if you do it with a connected device, you could break human bodies at scale. But our nirvana for all of us is that we want to move faster and break nothing. And I think that's sort of a mantra for our space. So we're commemorating this 10th anniversary as sort of an opportunity to look back at where we've come, what we've learned over the last 10 years, and also talk about what we see with the next 10 and where the new frontiers are on for accelerating medical device software. How do we continue to make safer, more effective software and bring it to market sooner for patients who, by the way, incidentally happen to be all of our friends, family, coworkers, and neighbors. So with all that, I want to welcome two great panelists today, Michael Iglesias and Larkin Lowry. They're going to give some good insights on this subject. So, and by the way, please feed questions in as you get in the chat panel here. We got a whole bunch of questions before the panel. I'm not even sure we can address all of those. In fact, I think what we decided actually is there were enough questions on one deep dive topic, which is when you get very specific about applying standards, 62304 and QMS and different documentation approaches with Agile and medical device, how do you apply those? So we'll address some of those at a high level, but we will have already decided to peel off and do a second webinar and follow up that'll specifically hone in on those talks for people who really want to dive deeper, geek out, if you will, on those subjects. So I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves a bit, talk about their experiences. Basically, what landed you on the panel today? What kinds of roles have you worked in? What kinds of medical devices? And what kind of software that's not necessarily a medical device or even medical that you've worked on that have informed your journey on this way? So Michael, you're first, and please don't forget the first job you had, because that's definitely a fascinating piece of critical infrastructure.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Iglesias, and I'm a medical device software quality professional. And yeah, as Randy kind of alluded to, my first role in the mobile technology space was actually at Apple. And I worked there and launched the first generation iPhone and the first generation iPad. And that's what really catapulted me into understanding and seeing this new set of devices, technology, and software, and how it can really change everything that we do. And we've seen that today, right? Since the first iPhone launch. And since then, I moved into a V&V engineer at Johnson & Johnson, or Janssen Pharma, where we worked on class 1 medication reminder applications, iOS and Android, and some cloud technologies. And then I moved into the diabetes space at Eli Lilly, worked with them, as well as Novo Nordisk, Philips, and Roche. And that's where I'm at today. And yeah, so I worked on mobile apps that are not medical devices, or you could just say product software, just generalized health applications, and all the way up through a class 3 embedded software and a defibrillator and AED. And of course, everything there in between, and everything in the diabetes space pretty much is probably a class 2 in the US. So I've seen quite a bit along my journey and in the past 10 years. and at several different big companies. And so, I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great. So yeah, that's a quick little background on me.
Thank you. Larkin, you give us a little background on you, how you're here, and also on the kinds of critical infrastructure that you worked on before you got into MedTech.
Yeah, hi, Larkin Lowry here. So I've been in the software engineering space for more than 25 years. Let's just leave it at that. When I got started, it was just before the dot-com era really kicked off. And I ended up spending a lot of my formative years in the startup space, in the dot-com startup space. And really, I've spent most of my career at small companies, at startups, emerging companies. And, that's a lot of my context. Over, let's say, the past 2 decades, so, the 2000s, 2010s, I spent the bulk of that time in telematics, right? So this is vehicle tracking, fleet management, et cetera, where we were installing hardware into vehicles to monitor them, not just their position, but also we would interface with the engine computers to extract diagnostic data from them that the fleets can use to optimize their operations. And as part of that, while it wasn't as safety critical as a medical device, we were interfacing with things such as the anti-lock braking system. And the vehicle manufacturers were very protective of that system because you could cause the wheels to lock up and cause an accident. So we did have some safety-related issues or concerns there, even though we weren't a regulated industry. And at the same time, we were also deeply integrated into the wireless carrier networks, so AT&T and Verizon in the U.S., for example. And as part of those integrations, at the time we were doing this, the wireless data infrastructure was very emerging and immature at that point, and so our integrations had to be deep. And as part of that, we had to go through a lot of qualification procedures in order to be able to operate on those different carrier networks. So in a lot of ways, it was very reminiscent of what one has to do to file with the FDA. So I spent a good bit of time there outside of the medical space. I did do some contracting and consulting with some medical companies that just gave me a flavor of how awful software development processes are within the healthcare and medical space. And I largely tried to avoid it until I got recruited into Tandem Diabetes to help them reboot their digital health program and to bring in Agile, to bring in a lot of the modern software development practices that were much more commonplace outside of medtech. And so I was able to bring all of the learnings that I had acquired during my time in the vehicle telematics space, ultimately at a company that was purchased by Verizon and operating from within Verizon, and be able to apply those learnings to medtech. And it was quite an experience and journey.
Wonderful. Well, great backgrounds for both of you to have. So let's start with a general question. I think Larkin will go to you first, which is, what is Agile? I mean, what's the unique value of it? What problems is it trying to solve? Sort of what's the genesis, maybe a little bit. Obviously, we're time limited here. That's a month in itself. And what do you think the misperceptions are about Agile? What isn't Agile? What problems is it not trying to solve? And how does that lead to challenges in our space? So all that in 2 minutes or less.
2 minutes or less. Fantastic. Well, first of all, it's a product development methodology at a very, very high level. There was a question/comment submitted by one of the attendees that basically, the person was observing that everybody seems to have a different idea of what Agile is and how to employ Agile and use Agile and follow Agile practices. And so I'm going to give you my interpretation of what Agile is and what I think is successful about it. And then, as Randy mentioned, some of the misperceptions. So as I mentioned, it's a product development methodology. It's not a software engineering methodology. It's not a software development and assembly methodology. It literally is product development. It is starting with, the back of the napkin. Your product manager hit their head in the shower and they came up with a great idea. They want to then commercialize it, right? So it basically is a methodology to cover how you take this idea. Maybe it's a newly identified user need. Maybe it's a new way to address a known user need. all the way through execution and delivery to the customer, and then getting feedback from the customer to determine whether or not your solution to that user need is good, is valued by the customer. So as a methodology, and again, it's not just the engineering teams that are involved in this process, it is the entire organization. Typically, you will hear about the relationship. It's an important relationship between software engineering and the product owner, so product management. But it's not just the two of those roles that are super critical. It is the totality of service delivery for your business. You have to consider how you're going to support your customers, right? So customer care has to be deeply involved, not just in being trained on how to support the product, but giving them opportunities to provide input for how the product could be made to need less customer service, right? How to avoid that call into your customer service organization. You may be involving finance, right? There could be some aspect to how you're delivering your product, which could influence or be influenced by how customers pay for it, who pays for it, et cetera. Anyway, there's just a few flavors, but the Agile process is really about taking all of these inputs from all of the different parties that are involved with delivering your product or service and providing feedback loops so that you can collect their feedback, you can produce an iteration that tries to materialize an idea that you derived from their feedback and deliver that to a customer, and then get feedback from the customer, feed that back into the very beginning, and iterate and iterate and iterate. It's a very data-driven process. But again, it's one that has to be completely comprehensive within the organization and just, not just be an engineering organization. So, and some of the misperceptions is that Agile is to make things faster. Well, that's actually not the point of Agile. To me, the point of Agile is to manage your risk. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to have Randy pull up a slide here in a second to illustrate what I'm trying to get at there. But what I found when first implementing Agile and going through that process is that as we used Agile to reduce our risks, and again, I'll illustrate what I mean by that in a second, we found that we were operating more efficiently. We were making more efficient use of the resources that we had. The developers were working more efficiently. Our QA engineers were working more efficiently. The entire organization, in terms of personnel utilization efficiency, was much, much, much more efficient and more productive. So as a consequence, we were delivering faster, right? But that wasn't the objective. The objective was efficiency and risk reduction. So Randy, if you can throw up that slide, I'd appreciate that. So, what I mean by risk management is, and I'll just illustrate how I was operating prior to being thrown into the Agile pool back at the late 2000s. So at that point in time, we were still kind of coming off of the overhang from the hangover from the .com era, and one of the characteristics of the .com era was that the people going into that space basically had completely rejected the establishment, right? All of the establishment software engineering practices and processes, those were too heavy, they were too annoying. I just wanted to code. The heck with you guys. I'm going to go to some .com startup and I'm just going to sling code, right? And it was just coding cowboys, and it was just completely crazy. And as you can imagine, as a consequence of that, basically running around with scissors, there were a lot of problems. And the problems that we were encountering were the product management would come up with a grandiose idea, very large, and they would ask us to build it, right? So we would go and we would build it, and we would spend a lot of time trying to understand better from the product owner, what it is that they wanted. We built a thing, and then we would release it to the market, and we would get crickets. Market didn't want it, didn't like it, something, whatever it was, couldn't get traction. Product owner would say, I've looked at plan A. Plan A had all sorts of holes in it, but I've come up with plan B. Plan B is awesome. We'll get it this time. So then we go and we build plan B, and we get crickets again. All right, so then we're like, okay, well, let's go back and reevaluate what failed with plan B. And then they come up with plan C. And then we get like 2/3 of the way into plan C, and the product owner's like, whoa, wait, hold on. Plan C is not going to work. We need to just skip that and go straight to plan D, right? And so as an engineering organization, we just got fatigued, right? Of, oh my God, so here comes the product owner with some crazy idea. It's not going to go anywhere. We're going to spend all this time working and building and struggling to get this thing out, and it's not going to go anywhere. And once we adopted Agile and really used Agile to improve our relationship with the product owner, but also in the spirit of those shorter iterations, we were making the scope of what we were doing smaller, and we were getting the opportunity to get the feedback from the market sooner, more frequently. And that ended up producing for us better products the customers actually wanted and liked. And we were delivering more quickly and more effectively, right? So, so what I'm trying to get at with this slide here is that Agile for me is all about managing the risks of the assumptions that you're making when you are making a plan for your iteration or for your product development. So what my fancy artistic graph here is trying to show is that as you're making predictions about the future, right, you're making a set of assumptions and you're predicting about where the industry is going to be in 5 years, right? You're going to make a prediction about where the customers are going to be in a year from now, what kind of products they're going to want a year from now. You're going to make assumptions about the available technology. You're evaluating cloud platforms. Is this particular tool the right tool? Is it going to be the right tool a year from now or 2 years from now? When you start getting further and further out in time, those assumptions and those predictions of the future get less and less and less accurate. And so what we have to do is try to reduce the time scale that we're trying to make predictions about. And as we start to pull in our horizon to get it closer to us, to get our assumptions and our predictions more accurate, we start to get to the point where if we pull this in too close to looking at our feet, we start to get a lot of noise in our signal because we're reacting to things that are happening on too short of a time base, right? So we're looking for a time horizon for our vision and our planning that is going to give us immunity from the noise of short-term thinking, but also reduce the error that we get from the uncertainty of our predictions and our assumptions, right? So, and I've illustrated some of these risk factors here. So, vision, where's the industry going? Requirements, how accurate are your requirements? Do you want to find out in 6 months that one of your requirements was ill-defined? Design, is your design appropriate? How long do you want to wait to find out that your design isn't as good as it should have been? Anyway, we want to reduce these risks, and we use the Agile process through these short iterations to help us better understand these risks and manage these risks in order to deliver a better product. And when you think about what we have to do within medtech, this to me is a natural fit, right? Everything that we do has to do with managing the risk of our product that we're delivering. So frankly, to me, Agile is the perfect and ideal process for medtech.
So Michael, let me twist the question a little bit for you.
Okay.
And by the way, for those who haven't seen it, you can Google the Agile Manifesto, which was literally like the statement the original founders of Agile got together and nailed on the door of the church, so to speak. There are 12 principles that have pretty much stuck. So Michael, let me give you a quick story for context. So .com era, this is 2000, back with Larkin, we're of the same ilk. I'm in a consulting firm that's building both really cool .com startups, which went nowhere, and building enterprise things for really big companies, which went nowhere also at the time, largely because we were building things that they sounded great, but didn't have solutions for real problems. And we had one Agile, like January of 2000, somebody pulled out and showed me there, a really good engineer who's, by the way, now in medtech, he's a CTO in medtech, pulls out a book about tells me why this is the nirvana. He's been a hardcore engineer for a decade, and this is where it's going. And we had this one team that worked with a startup doing XP, so an early variant of Agile that you really don't hear about much anymore, at least I don't. And they were killing it with that startup. It was going great. And then that project ended, and they did something interesting in consulting firm. They tried to shop themselves around as an Agile team to others, and went over to our biggest client at the time, which wasn't AIG, but let me say AIG because it was an AIG-like company. And they started trying to say, oh yeah, we're going to go do Agile and extreme programming at AIG. To which, when the client partner heard that, he basically said, over my dead body, will these ever be sold by us? And if any of you know of anybody trying to enter that building or emailing somebody, I want to know immediately to cut that off at the head, because it is the worst possible match. All right, so fast forward 10 years to 2012, 12 years to 2012. In corporate America, Agile's really sort of reached this tipping point, right? It's getting adopted everywhere, and it's not universal, but it's definitely on the way to being sort of the norm. And frankly, it's getting hard to hire engineering teams if you're going to tell them, well, we're not going to do Agile. And around that time, it really starts to get kicked off within medtech, right? So actually, the first question we have here is really goes in well, which is for modern commercial SaaS products, using Agile and DevOps. We hear about deployments every day, even many times a day. But what are we seeing of this with companies producing CMD? And what are some of the key aspects? So where have we seen Agile actually take root in medical device software, regulated software, CMD, or more traditional firmware embedded connected software?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I think, from my personal experience, just being on the mobile app software side, Agile is definitely something you have to do, and it's a great way to, like Larkin kind of said, at every iteration, you're addressing risk, and you're able to do those product demos and retrospectives and show, essentially, help deliver safer and more effective products to the market. So I would say, with respect to the companies that I've been at, and mobile apps in cloud technologies, when they're paired together, Agile just makes sense, and it's just something that you have to do. And I think to be successful, when you're on the market and you're going through DevOps and you're doing these continuous deployments and design changes, it's important to have a really good platform, an ALM, like application lifecycle management platform, that's aligned to your QMS and all of your processes. And that will help spearhead and streamline all of your deployments and all of your documentation that you can really quickly spin up and have it reviewed and approved. So that's just kind of what I've seen and what I've experienced, at least in my career.
And where do you think we're at in terms of a tipping point? Like if somebody's in software and medical device and they go to a firm and they say, yeah, we're not really doing Agile, or we're just the beginning. Is that a red flag for somebody? Are there still places where it's probably not time yet, or we're early on the adoption curve? You think there's the jury out of places where maybe it shouldn't go?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the complexity of the product you're building. I've seen some software products, like embedded products, that were very, very straightforward, very simple software. And they said, we maybe don't really need to do a real Agile kind of a framework to develop this. And maybe it's more of a waterfall or maybe V model. But most companies, what I've seen is they still, from the product level development or life cycle, it's still very V model. But then they say, okay, but to actually develop the software within it, we're actually going to embed Agile methodologies and the Agile kind of phases throughout the V model. So
it's sort of a question of, if you look at them as a Venn diagram, maybe, of is Agile growing more and more within the V model? more and more.
I would say yes. I would say from what I've seen, I'm seeing Agile is definitely being adopted, and it's kind of a hard requirement for these software-based products. But at the let's say the product level, they're still kind of talking about the V model. But what we're doing is really baking in the Agile methodology within the V model. And I'm seeing more and more of that with more companies. So, and hearing more about it as well.
So let me throw a question out to both of you now, kind of picking up, we've had a bunch of questions about, how often do you change requirements, SOP integration, how much change is change, how do you do within regulated frameworks? So let me flip this. Can you describe success? What does it look like when this method is really clicking in a med tech context? Like what feels different? What do you be like, yeah, this is, we're on the right path. Talk about, give people a picture of success and kind of what's different. And I'm sorry, we didn't practice this question. This is coming to me on the fly. So it's totally unfair.
Yeah, let me kind of throw my my quick little answer. You know, coming from a quality perspective, I would say, how do I define success would be like key metrics. You know, if we have a product that's doing agile development and then they get all to the way to the release or even on the market, if from quality, if I'm seeing a lot of deviations and a lot of product complaints being logged, or, you know, deviations that turn into quality trends, you know, much larger issues, I would say that if I'm seeing that, then that kind of tells me, hey, there's a red light, you know, we got to figure something out. But other than that, you know, I think to be successful, you know, every company is going to be a little bit different. I've seen companies put a successful product on the market and we almost never got a complaint or had any kind of deviations or non-conformances when we've been in front of the auditors or inspectors. And then the company, you know, and then the product team said, hey, we're actually going to retire this product from the market. We don't, you know, we really don't see a return on our investment from it. So I think it just really depends. How do you define success? I can tell you what I think success is from a quality perspective, but that's going to be very different than a product owner's definition of success, and even like an engineer or architect's definition.
We've got 13 minutes, so let's take the next 3 between them. I'll tell you, why don't you give an engineer's definition, and Larkin, maybe you could do a product owner's definition of success for what it feels like when this is all going well in a med tech context.
So, you know, from the product owner's perspective, they're largely getting feedback that their crazy ideas are not so crazy. And they're getting that feedback early and regularly. So what that does is it helps them solidify a base of features and functionality that are developing and maintaining traction for the product, right? So instead of thinking about how to reimagine the product, how to pivot the product, you're thinking about how to build upon the product that you've already created. So, you know, this is something that you can do on very short timescales. And, you know, there was a question in the chat about human factors and how that fits into the Agile process. And one of the things that Orthogonal brought to us at Tandem was the idea of the 3 user Thursdays, which is to do a very limited, focused human factor study every week. Right. So, you know, we were actually not doing every week. We were doing every sprint, so every 2 weeks. But being able to incorporate that human factors study every sprint as part of our UX team, using mock-ups, whatever it is that we had, we were able to get ahead of usage errors. We were able to get ahead of, you know, just user preferences. You know, we were working a lot with endocrinologists, and, you know, they have very particular ways that they want to see data. We could get that feedback very early. So what this does, you know, so, all right, that's nice that the product owner knows this stuff early, but what this means is that when you find an issue and you have to go back and do some rework, the scale of the rework is smaller, the impact to the overall schedule in the project is smaller, because you found out early before things snowballed and got to the point. Because a lot of times, you know, you have an issue and you don't know it, it's there, and you continue to build and build and build and build and build. By the time you find out you have a problem, you may have to do a lot of damage in order to fix that problem that was created 6 months ago, right? So again, from the product owner's perspective, they're getting what they want faster, and they're more confident that it's what the customer wants.
All right, Michael, what's it like for an engineer when it's going well? What do they describe in our space, and what's different than what it might have been?
Well, as an engineer, if I take off the quality hat, and I would say what's going well, you know, if you're in the V&V space as an engineer, if you burn through all of your tests, whether it's automated or manual, and you come back and say, hey, like, we found no failures. But that's, you know, during formal V&V, you would probably expect that if you're doing all of your all of your unit testing and automated testing through every iteration, then you kind of have a good idea, a good sense that, hey, all of my tests really should pass. I should have a very clean and quick V&V. And that's kind of what I've seen. And that's one of the successes I've seen software engineering teams really deliver on is, the traditional med devices. I think, I haven't worked on specifically a hardware device, but what I have seen is they get to that point of the formal V&V, it can be a little scary. They're not really sure what to expect. But with software, we're able to test it very quickly. Like I said, automated, we can run through some manual tests. We can do some level of validation activities through doing those product demos and through retrospectives and stuff like that. So I would say, as an engineer, not only delivering the product on time, if you were to go down the project manager kind of a route, but really making sure that all of your risks are addressed, all of your requirements are met, and all of your tests are passing, and you really have met your user needs at the end of the day.
Right. Great, thanks. So first, I do want to apologize again. There's no way we're going to get through even a fraction of these questions, and I'm not even going to try on this call, at least now in the 40 minutes, to tackle some of these great detailed ones. Like while building CMD, we're following QMS SOP, requires us to go through DIR, design input review, which is very waterfall. Is there anything we can do to adopt Agile? Do we need to rethink our SOP? Great question. We'll give it its own time. If we have time afterwards in the Q&A and you want to stick around, we'll hit it. But we will definitely do a follow-up where we basically take a bunch of these questions and do it. So let me ask a more general high-level question to the two of you with our 8 minutes of core time left. So that's been the first 10 years. I don't know if you could say the war is over and it's been won for Agile and MedTech, but certainly Agile's won several important battles, in the adoption part in MedTech. And I don't know if we're at a stalemate now, it's more sort of like a ground game or a rugby scrum where you just sort of slow incremental steps. But I think there's two themes that have come out. We see them a lot in a number of the questions here and before in our conversation, which is what's the next 10 years about? And so I want to ask you about two themes that have come up here in some of our preparation discussion. One is, and they're all sort of around the border of that. What are the borders of Agile? One is sort of how far can we take Agile in terms of other disciplines? Can we loop our human factors fully into Agile? Somebody hasn't said it, but could you extend all the way your regulators? Could you get them into an Agile process in theory? Where can you take the boundary? Somebody asked about verification and validation. I think people talked about DevOps, or how far can you take it into after you launch and you're live, but you have a connected device. So you still are actually operating the device, part of it yourself, and not just sending it out into the world to be operated. And then the other question, which I think relates to this, is complexity. Medical devices clearly aren't getting less complex, right? We're baking all kinds of great things into them: interoperability, connectivity, 5G, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, AI, ML, EHR, you name it. Consumer smartphone sensors. So how will Agile help us in the next 10 years? And what are the frontiers we're going to have to tackle the next 10 years to make the most of the possible value, really, for our patients? Gherkin? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so, a big part of this for me is in the concept of software segregation that we have through 62304. All right. And the FDA has actually published quite a bit about the idea of separating out your medical device function from your other functions, right? You have a product, part of that product is the medical device, but there's a lot of stuff that's part of your product that isn't a medical device. It's not providing therapy. It's not involved. Maybe it's functionality for you to change your cloud password, something like that. And they've made it very clear that they don't want to have to be inspecting and regulating those other functions because they don't have time for it, right? They want to focus on the aspects of your medical device that are a medical device. So certainly taking that mindset to how we approach software architecture is very important to make sure that we can develop our software and have it be partitioned in such a way that we can actually manage the software development lifecycle for that particular slice, independent of other slices. And Michael has some interesting things that he can comment on that about. But I think that's a really important area, is just being able to separate out what's class 3 versus class 2 in your stack? What is not even a medical device at all? What's completely unregulated, and being able to separate out and partition and run all of those teams in parallel. Another aspect that I think is really important here is that a lot of the comments and questions that have come in have been around the documentation burden, right? Which is epic. It's huge. And what I see as the path forward is where we're not actually managing documents directly, but indirectly. We're using document generation, where we're actually encoding the information somewhere else in some other way. Maybe it's Gherkin specs as part of our testing practices, where we're encoding requirements, and we're actually generating those Word docs that all of the compliance people love to have. So the documentation becomes an artifact of the work that we're doing. The documentation is not the starting point. Okay, so here's an example of from a presentation I did last fall on using Gherkin specs. So here, this is a file that is given to the developers to use for their test automation. It is written by product owners or business analysts or quality engineers, whoever it is that's writing requirements can write these Gherkin specs in a very conventional requirements format. We're able to use these @ prefixed annotations to indicate which portions of this Gherkin spec actually are used to generate our documentation. So from this spec, we're able to generate our product requirements and our software requirements documentation. So we're not managing those Word docs directly. We're using them indirectly, and we're using them for what they're good for, which is doing review, right? We can review the Word doc, but we're not editing and managing the Word doc. We're doing it through basically document generation. And I think that really is a great opportunity to reduce a lot of the workload associated with document management.
Couple minutes left. Michael, you want to
I have a couple couple kind of things that pop into head in my immediate brain around this. You kind of mentioned what is Agile going to be like in the next 10 years? And I think from a regulatory perspective, as the FDA is moving away from the traditional computer system validation and more into computer system assurance or computer software assurance, to me, which is kind of more of a, we would rather you spend more time in assuring that your software works correctly, rather than all this comprehensive documentation. And that to me speaks directly to, I think, two of the pillars of the Agile Manifesto, which is deliver working software rather than comprehensive documentation. Spend your time actually making sure your product works rather than spending all your time documenting everything up. But I still think, there will be a level of regulatory scrutiny around, you are going to have to meet some of those documentation requirements, but I think the FDA is starting to really now accept Agile and roll it into some of their frameworks. And I know computer system, CSV and CSA are not truly for SAMD, but it is kind of a framework that they are going down that path. Now, another trend that I'm starting to see in a lot of these big manufacturers is, years and years ago, for mobile apps, the product owner and the product team says, hey, we want to build a class 2 medical device mobile app, and it's going to have all the perfect features for release 1.0. And that was the minimum viable product. And that was really a thing that it never was successful. But now what I'm starting to see is this trend of companies are like, let's start with an MVP that are just the core functionalities. And maybe that MVP is not even a regulated device. It's not even truly SAMD yet. It's just a health app. And then you talk to the product, and it's important to talk to the product owner to understand where is this product, this mobile app or whatever it is going to evolve to. And a lot of times what you'll find is they say, hey, the next release, we're going to introduce this feature. And then me and regulatory would go, okay, that's a class 1. So now we got to talk about doing this level of rigor of documentation and activities. And then they say, okay, a year from now, it's now AI machine learning. And we go, okay, that's now you're looking into a class 2. So you actually, in my opinion, it benefits the companies, whether you're small or large, to start off with a small MVP product, even if it's unregulated, and then you can really help define and polish your processes along the way to get you up to that more higher risk regulated product. And I think that if you take that journey and you have all of that documentation, and maybe early on, because it's not unregulated, Things may be a little mix and match, but you still have all of the Agile artifacts there. And then you show the FDA through a formal submission or a pre-sub that, hey, here's where the product started. 2 years down the road, here's all the improvements we've made to it. And here's all the comprehensive documentation that it matches to that now product. And I think that that is something that the FDA would really look at you as a manufacturer and go, wow, like you guys really know what you're doing. You can really assure us that this is a safe and effective product. So I think that that's really where Agile is going to go from like a large, manufacturer perspective.
Interesting. I don't know if everybody can see the 12 points. That's great. So Mark, let's bring it home with this. So this is the original Agile manifesto that got nailed on the CIO's door, I guess, by the people who created this. And I think probably the most famous line of these 12 is number 7. Working software is the primary measure of progress. At the end of the day, it's not about the documents. It's about what you've built that actually does anything, because anything else is just a poor proxy for it. And I think, Michael, what you're getting at is saying, good news to everybody, have hope. These worlds are converging. There's definitely more openness, and there's broader trends in the FDA that may not be saying these exact words, but that's the theme that everybody seems to be centering around. And so it's coming, and is what I think, if I had to sum up what you're saying at a high level, just start aligning yourself around those principles and taking small steps, and things will get better, even if we can't go to the nirvana of, being so confident in our ML algorithm that it's literally dynamically updating on a cleared algorithm for delivering electrical stimulation to the heart. But we're on a road that way, and that's clearly where we leave 10 years in. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Larkin,
Yep,
can you bring us home?
Yeah, so, just to touch on a couple of things that have just been said. So, what Michael was making me think about is that, this idea of starting small, building incrementally with confidence is something that really needs support from the very top of the organization. If your leadership of the organization says, we want a big bang, don't give us anything that isn't a big bang, you're in trouble, right? Trying to deliver that moonshot is extremely risky, and it's going to be a miserable experience. So changing minds upstream is very important to get them to think more incrementally and to support this type of iterative process. So that's a change that is going to happen within the industry, within industry leadership. But to this point of number 7 here and delivering the working software, there's an old saying apparently in this industry, which is that our business, what do? We produce software. I'm sorry, we produce documentation, but we also produce medical devices on the side, right? Sorry, goof that up, but anyway, get the point. And so, to me, what number 7 means is that it is the product itself that is going to generate the revenue for the business. It is the quality of what we do that is going to keep our patients safe and also keep our company safe as a consequence. So we have to do that, but I think another thing that we need to be thinking about as we move into the back half of this decade is that what is documentation, right? What does it really mean, right? The role that it fills is to be able to let a participant view and validate information that you're trying to convey, right? In a way that everybody can consume. So, in my world, prior to MedTech, the joke was that all of our documentation ended in semicolons, right? Because we basically were saying that it's our source code, and that's if you want to know what the source code is supposed to do or what it does, just read the code. And so you can't ask somebody who's not an expert software engineer to read the code. They need to have some sort of a document that they can read that is in a form that they can consume. And so that's why we have all of these terrible Word docs. But the Word doc does not have to be the origin of the information. So, with that Gherkin example, the Word doc is an artifact that is produced by the source of truth, which is the Gherkin spec files. Another example is, with any cloud product, you have a whole sea of REST APIs, tons and tons of REST APIs. You should be defining those REST API interface contracts using the Open API specs. And those Open API spec documents can then be used to generate a Word doc that others can review to make sure that your API interface specifications meet the user needs and et cetera, et cetera. So we'd have to start thinking about the documentation that we are using for our reviews, that we are submitting, that we are maintaining as part of our record. We have to think of those documents as now artifacts that are generated from something else, where that something else is more actually useful for us.
Great, thank you. So we've got time left to take questions, but for those of you who have hung on actually 6 minutes over the promised time, hopefully we've delivered on the core promise we've given you. Send us your questions now or after. We would love to do more of these, and we will be doing more of these over the course of the summer and the fall. So I'm going to drill into some of the specific ones. So let's go deep a bit. Okay, so here's an interesting one. How is Agile applied after verification, leading up to and going through validation in the development phase? And somebody else said, will Agile ever move to the right of V and V? You know, how far can you take it?
So my interpretation of this, right, is that Agile and Waterfall can actually be seen as very similar, right? Because when you go into a sprint, you have to plan a sprint, right? You have a sprint planning meeting before the sprint actually kicks off. At the end of the sprint, you have your retrospective meeting where you're reviewing, essentially testing, you know, what you produced in the sprint. And so, you know, a lot of these mechanisms are very, very similar. It's just that Agile focuses on them being occurring in a very small time frame and also in a very, very limited scope, right? Only enough, you know, enough scope that, you know, your engineering team can complete it within, say, you know, a 2-week sprint cycle. So when we think about V&V, you know, certainly verifying is easy, right? Because you can just verify that all of your requirements have been met. But when you're validating, that gets more complicated, because if you do require a human factor study to determine whether or not your solution is valid, that can take quite a lot of time, depending on what you're doing. If you have to do a clinical trial, if you have to do, anything else that has a very long time frame, you can have some difficulties and challenges getting that to be completely agile. So, the part of the approach that I like to take is that Agile is about delivering valuable and useful software. We can deliver that internally to an internal customer and basically give us a little bit of breathing room to do those other things that we have to do before we can actually deliver it to live customers. But the principle is the same, right? That Agile has, is that we want to deliver something that is complete and usable, so that we can get the feedback and from delivering that usable software and incorporate that feedback into the next iteration and have something that we can build on. And we can't do that by delivering to internal customers.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm looking at this question, just trying to wrap my head around, applied after verification, leading up to and going through validation in the development phase. So I've seen it done maybe a couple different ways at different companies. At one company, we had a live SAMD in a clinical trial with a new drug. It was not a combination product. But we certainly were doing iterative updates and releases while we were in the clinical trial, and it was under a very tight control and very tight timelines. But we were able to get through it, and we did, and I think that we did it pretty successfully to keep that, as we were getting that feedback from real clinical users, going through our development process, and then issuing, a case, say, hey, we need to do a design change. And then we kicked it back to development, and then they figured out it's going to take us 1 sprint or 2 sprints to get this out. And so, yeah, I think that, you certainly can do Agile after V&V and go even when it gets kicked back into development. If you do have to issue a design change request, And yes, I mean, I did it through a clinical trial, and we pushed out the, controlled updates to the mobile apps in real time. Once everything was done, and we went through our own internal verification of the new software release. So it's not impossible. I think maybe many companies haven't thought that far yet. Maybe companies are thinking of Agile as it only exists in the development phase, and once you get to V&V, it's kind of all over. But that's not necessarily the case. Another company I've seen had actually said, "Hey, we're going to build in testing iterations of actual formal testing and verification." So you still are kind of in that Agile mindset. So,
all right, that's actually, that leads to the next question I was looking at here, which is right, almost there. Here we go. What are some practical change impact assessment methods you utilize within the SAMD Agile framework? Imagine with the multiple iterations within Agile, it can become daunting to keep evaluating and documenting change impacts within this regulated framework. So I think this gets to the, how far do you take this? How can you bake these things together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So with every change, like a design change request that goes through once you're under change management, you always have to do an impact assessment to all of your prior documentations and artifacts. And what I have seen and done is you still have a comprehensive change request form that the project manager either owns or a technical lead or manager. And if you work closely with quality, what I have done is said, hey, okay, what is this change? What's the scope of the change? Are we just changing bugs? Are we adding a new feature? Are we adding a configuration change on the back end? And then we go, and then I kind of, I approve it, and then I say, okay, hand it off to the development team, and they go to work, and then they come back to me with their artifacts that, hey, we implemented this change, it's ready to go, we tested it, do you approve it? And that happens quite a bit. I mean, if you're working in SAMD and mobile apps, I hope that you're taking an agile methodology and to deliver these releases and platforms. But yeah, I think that I kind of agree with this person. It can become daunting to keep evaluating and documenting change impacts. And I've kicked back a few CRs where I said, hey, no, this particular change where we want to implement, actually, I believe it does have a safety impact or an impact to risk management. And that's when I would reach out to the project manager or the risk manager and go, hey, let's meet real quick. Do you agree with me? Yes or no? And they say, yeah, actually, you're right. It does have an impact to risk. So maybe also, having a close relationship and building your relationship with your teammates, maybe if they're not the core teammates, but maybe your other regulatory affairs person and your quality engineer or your QA engineer should definitely come in handy and help out there.
All right. Lark, I don't know if you have anything to add. A question I think is up your alley, if you're interested.
Well, so, an aspect of this to me is to make sure that you are architecting your software to minimize the potential change impacts. So, one of the, I guess, things that I discovered when entering into the medtech space is that monoliths are alive and well, whereas they've been largely abandoned outside. And one of the characteristics of a monolith is that they end up tending to be spaghetti, right? A lot of interconnected junk. It's all one big unit. There's a lot of interdependencies within the different systems within that large monolith. And so obviously, if you're going to make any small change in one spot, you could have any number of different consequences in some other part of the software in terms of how the software functions. And so from a software delivery perspective and software architecture and design perspective, getting away from monoliths, getting your software more isolated and partitioned, and more sort of abstracted in its role helps you because you can define better boundaries around that software. certainly if the change is going to impact, usage errors, for example, it's a very different thing. So I think one aspect to focus on is just making sure that you have good isolation in your overall software architecture. But then the second thing is that, the process that Michael described, everything is it's a process that is followed outside of medtech. Right. In my role in fleet management, we had SLAs with Google, for example. We were feeding them GPS data for traffic analysis. And we had a very, very strict SLA with them. A small bug on our part could cost the company millions of dollars a day. If we had a bug. So whenever we were evaluating changes to our software, we had to do a risk analysis. We had to determine not necessarily was the customer going to be injured, but it was more like, were we going to be injured by this, right? So, we had the same concerns and we did the same things, except I would say that we were not documenting them to the extent that is necessary and beneficial within MedTech. But we would have those reviews. Is this change going to cause any harm?
So one other interesting thing, building on that, actually both of your recent comments and a couple questions we got and our prior discussion, is this question of when you have this much complexity floating around, who's watching it all? Does the process naturally self-regulate itself to ferret out all of these complexities and let you do the risk? Or do you need people who are just incredibly smart and looking at systems of systems? And I think the interesting conversation that's come up with some questions here and in prior stuff is this a moment of opportunity for the discipline of systems engineering in our space? Is this an opportunity because somebody's got to step up and really understand this stuff at the end of the day, end to end? And is that something it's calling for system engineers to fill in, or somebody else? How do we do that? Who understands how this stuff actually all works?
It's all black magic. No, I'm a big proponent of systems engineering. So I found that systems engineering can mean different things to different people, just the way that is for Agile. So I have seen some systems engineers that really just focus on requirements documentation, diagramming things, and being what I call party planners, right? Making sure that the right parties get together to discuss how systems are going to interface, but they're not actually doing the engineering work themselves. But I believe very strongly in having an actual engineer doing engineering work that is responsible for how the systems interact with each other, but also responsible for making sure that each system has a clearly defined boundary, that you're either inside the boundary or you're outside the boundary, and that any transfers between the inside and the outside have to go through extremely well-defined, specific, and finite set of interfaces, right? And they need to be responsible for managing those interfaces. So, one of the I guess an important aspect of a well-functioning Agile organization is that the Agile teams are small, right? A Scrum team should be 6 or 8 people, around there roughly. It shouldn't be 20, shouldn't be 15, probably not effective at 2, right? But if you have an engineering organization where you've got 100 engineers, 200 engineers, whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of different Scrum teams working on your product. They can't all be completely coordinated at all times. Otherwise, you're going to spend all of your energy just coordinating between these different Scrum teams. And so, and this is, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why microservices evolved, right? Microservice, cloud, REST API type of a service facility where it has a single responsibility. It only does the one thing. It's responsible for all of its resources. It has its own completely independent life cycle. It can be managed, and the entire life cycle can be managed by a single Scrum team. The system, the total super system, is a collection of microservices. So now what you've done is you've actually isolated all of your functionality so that it's very specific, very well defined in the form of these microservices. You have now the ability to scale your teams horizontally. where if you may have 100 plus microservices, and if you have 10 or 15 Scrum teams, they could each take 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever the number of microservices, and now your organization is able to scale the engineering workforce while maintaining peak productivity. You don't start to lose the productivity due to the inefficiency of having to coordinate all of the different Scrum teams. So, I think that's really key in terms of being able to scale not only in the magnitude of what you're trying to achieve, but also be able to deliver large projects in a shorter amount of time by being able to run these teams in parallel.
So I'll throw a question back, both of you, on this. It's going to push back a little bit on that, Gherkin, but I'll start by quoting Keegan Key from Key and Peele, where he says, all that. But really what I want to know is, if you've got 150 well-defined microservices that interoperate, who's designing those? Who's pointing out and saying, wait a minute, there's a gap. Which microservice is handling this? Or this microservice assumes this is happening, but nobody's doing that. Who's looking at all of that complexity? That's great if you can define the borders, but how do you find the gap?
So shockingly, it depends. Well, it depends, but shockingly, there are some companies, and I won't name names, that allow their microservices to be an emergent phenomenon. That there isn't rigid central planning, that their teams, they have so many engineers, thousands of engineers in the organization, you cannot possibly centrally plan all of your microservices. And so teams will develop, there will be redundancy, there will be some overlap, but overall, the system emerges to deliver the functionality that the company needs. So, this is a scenario that will occur in very large companies. I would say for, if you have an engineering team of, 200 or less, you're certainly not going to behave that way. You can have a, team of software architects, but I think the point that you're trying to get to, Randy, is the role of systems engineering basically being the owners of the system of systems, right? What you treat the entire business as a system in a way. You have to have engineers that understand what all of the different subsystems are within the organization, how they work, and actually can not just simply know how they work, but actually define and guide how they work by creating requirements to make sure that the organization's objectives are being met by all of these smaller independent teams that are operating more or less independently.
Yeah. By the way, in addition to systems engineering, there is a consulting discipline that sprung up, although it never really took hold in a big way, called business architecture, which was really tackling that same question of how do you define the solar plexus of the business at a detailed level so you can map that to the systems on top of the business? And how do you do business redesign along with systems redesign? Michael, so let me ask you this. You've been at some really big med tech companies. Is it feasible or advisable or a regulatory nightmare to let 1,000 microservices bloom? Inside a medical device.
Inside the medical device?
For shared services of medical devices.
I don't think I've ever worked on a product that had that many or even near that many. But I think it kind of what Larkin said originally around it. It kind of goes back to how you architect the product early on. And then from a quality perspective, I would say, okay, if we're early in on the development of a system that has these many microservices or components or whatever, I would say, are we building this product to actually be maintainable once we are on the market? Or is it going to be a design change nightmare? If everything is hard coded, that's a design change nightmare. And from what I have seen, from something that could have been more dynamic or more configurable. But yeah, I would say, it can be a regulatory and a documentation nightmare to have that level of a complexity of a system. So for me, I would say, let's really talk about and think about how maintainable is this product once we go to market? Are we architecting it to be such that we can actually maintain it and make iterative updates and fix, if we have to deploy hot fixes and things like that, can we do it very quickly in a short amount of time and still be compliant?
Here's a related question, I think, and then we can go on a different tangent. By the way, we still have about over 50% of our attendees are still hanging in here. So I don't know if you guys can keep going for a while, but I think as long as we got people here and good questions rolling in, I'm happy to take them. So
I can stay until 15 after the hour.
all right, so we'll give it another 9 minutes here, and then we will do more of these to get to this. So then a couple of people asked, actually, this would be interesting. Let's go back and drill in a little more. What's the value of the Gherkin specification you were showing, Larkin? Would it not require a lot of overhead for developers to write requirements as code? And so basically, if you're doing more instrumentation of these things, so the documentation becomes another set of data and metadata as opposed to standalone fixed documents. How does that help?
So the Gherkin spec was developed to look and feel very much like a requirements document. So it was designed to be natural language and in the conventional format that requirements are usually written in. So the product owner, business analysts, if you have them working on requirements, quality engineers, et cetera, they can write these Gherkin specs. The main difference for them is really just going to be they're going to stick some colons in a few key places and add some white space, indent things in a certain way. But for them, they're writing requirements very much like they would in the requirements documents themselves. So the change in workload behavior for them is that they're working with these text files that are stored within the developer's Git repos. So they do need to learn how to use Git, and it's really it's not that hard. The product owners, these are technical products. If your product owner can't figure out how to commit a change to Git, they're probably not going to be a good technical product owner. But that's just my opinion. So once the Gherkin spec is created, the quality engineers are going to come in and put in the annotations to give things nice IDs for generating the documents. So that's a little bit of work for them, but they need to go and make sure these things have proper IDs within a Word doc anyway. So it's not really incremental work for them. The developers get the Gherkin spec handed to them. The Gherkin spec contains not only the actual definition of the requirements, but it also encodes the acceptance criteria. You can see in the scenarios here. So you can encode all of those acceptance criteria such that the developer is able to, using the Cucumber library, which Gherkin is part of the Cucumber Cucumber framework. So, it's supported by every major language there is. And so the developer is then importing the Gherkin spec into their test code. And it's enumerating all of the different scenarios, which contains the acceptance criteria. And the acceptance criteria are then used as input to those automated test functions. So the developer is basically getting all of this stuff handed to them for free. And they just need to write then the code that takes the acceptance criteria and the conditions, the givens and the whatnots, the whens and thens, to actually run the code and compare it against those acceptance criteria. So anyway, it actually reduces workload for just about everybody, but more importantly, it makes this more accurate, right? So the alternative is you have a document in a Word doc somewhere that has your acceptance criteria in it. The developer has to read the requirements document and code a test that matches those requirements. And then they have to hard code in all the acceptance criteria exactly and precisely the way that it is documented in the Word doc, get it all right, get the test right, and run that and deliver that. With Gherkin, we're removing a lot of that potential for human error with the interpretation of the requirements and with the incorporation of the acceptance criteria. It's all there delivered to the developer. So it actually reduces error on behalf of the developer. It also, because we have a single source of truth for the acceptance criteria, there can only be one. And so there's no opportunities for a developer using an outdated version of the requirement or an outdated version of the acceptance criteria. They're always using the exact same version that was submitted and approved by the product owner.
I have a quick question for Larkin on this. Although this is it's really cool, and I've never seen this actually at any company. Do you think, or have you considered incorporating risk management as Gherkin specs along with respect to all these PRSs, SRSs, and things like that? Do you think that's a possibility?
I'd have to think about that a little bit more. So risk analysis is about understanding risk potential, right? So the Gherkin spec is more about encoding requirements. So if you had a requirement that addresses a risk, you could annotate the requirement in the Gherkin spec to say that, okay, this requirement addresses this or the set of documented risks. So I wouldn't see it as facilitating the actual risk analysis process, but more of the traceability aspect. And that was another aspect of this, which I presented last fall, which is we use all of this docgen that we're producing from the Gherkin files to create our requirements traceability matrix. And because the Gherkin files are actually running being used to run our test automation, our process that generates the documentation is the same process that's running all of our test automation. So we actually know, did the test pass or fail? And we can trace all the tests back to the requirement and the execution of the test, whether it was pass or fail. So it removes a tremendous amount of human error from this process.
Great.
We're just about wrap time. Michael, you want to give some parting words, and you can tee up what topics we can look at covering the next time around. We may be able to expand this. People send us your feedback, please, attendees. We may be able to expand this and, for example, have this be more of a roundtable with a larger group of discussants, but also a larger group on a webinar as well, and go to more of a hybrid.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you, Randy, and Orthogonal for hosting this webinar, and of course, Larkin, you joining this webinar along with me as a panelist. There's so many, the topics are endless, and I wish I could just sit here all day and all week and just have conversations with everybody and that kind of stuff. But we'll certainly look at producing other webinars or roundtables and like that to try and address a lot of these other kind of topics and stuff. So.
Right. I'm envisioning a radio call-in show with Dr. Sammy D, your Samantha D, Agile.
Yeah, a face-to-face event would be really cool, I think.
We actually, if people have thoughts on that discussion is going on right now. So I would be very interested in that. So.
Yeah, and looking through a lot of the questions posted just on the webinar, but also posted beforehand, I was really actually ecstatic to see so many people having put so much mental energy into thinking about this and actually being this deeply interested in this topic was really fantastic to see. I would really love to be part of more conversations and have it be more conversational, because I think there's a lot of people in this audience that have a lot of really great stuff to contribute. And I think it would be, better for, rather than it being broadcast, to be more conversational.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much to our two panelists. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to more questions and more of these in the future. Please reach out to us.